Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of To The Point podcast. As always, I'm your host, Noah Warren. And I don't know about you guys, but that was a pretty great sports weekend. From great NFL action to the college football playoff to hearing that the NHL is returning and then the World Juniors only 4 days away. There's a lot of great things on the horizon and a lot to touch on today. But I thought I'd start off the show talking about college football. And one of my friends this morning just said, "Why don't you touch on it on the podcast?" And I said, "That's a good idea." So this weekend, the college football championship games were played. This is for the power conferences like the Big Ten, which has Ohio State, Michigan, the SEC, Southeastern Conference with Alabama, Florida. They played against each other. The Big 12 between Oklahoma and Ohio State, and so on. So what happens after these games? These teams have all played their schedule. This year, it was completely different because Ohio State was only able to play 6 games due to COVID and starting their season late. And then you had teams like Alabama who actually got to play they played almost their full schedule. They had to miss one game due to COVID, but they went 11-0. So what happens is this committee, which we don't really know who's on the committee. It's like this. It's called the College Football Playoff Committee, and they do rankings throughout the whole year. They rank teams based on their wins and losses. And at the end of the year, they get together and they vote on the final four teams. And the final four will play each other on New Year's Day. And that's the college football playoff, the Sugar Bowl and the Rose Bowl. And then the other teams that aren't in the final four will play bowl games. And that's just basically a money grab for teams to play another game and to put it on ESPN and get good ratings and things like that. But so the big story yesterday was who was in the Final Four, of course. So Alabama was ranked one. They were, like I said, undefeated. They had beaten a lot of good teams. They'd beaten Georgia. They'd beaten Florida. They beat Texas A&M. So they had a great record. Them being number one, no problem. Number two was Clemson. They're out of the ACC, and they're in a conference with Notre Dame. They lost one game to Notre Dame in double overtime without their star quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, who will likely be going first overall in the draft in April. Third was Notre Dame, third was Ohio State, who, like I said, they went undefeated. They beat Northwestern on Saturday. Wasn't the prettiest victory, wasn't the most impressive, but 6 games, but they won. So they got in there. And then fourth, like I said earlier, it's Notre Dame. So Notre Dame was the last team. Now there's really not much debate, but how these teams get picked is really interesting, and the system that they use. So in 2014, the college football, the Power Five conferences, the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12, the Big 10, and the Pac-12, all voted on a 14 playoff. So basically, before that, it was 2 teams. And then before that, computers basically picked a national champion based on win percentage, how large size of victories, things like that. It was the NCAA and college football has been a mess for a long time. It's some of the greatest product you'll watch as sports, but the way they handle business is really poor. So, like I said, these 4 teams are voted in. But the thing is that Ohio State has played 6 games. Like I mentioned before, Alabama's played 11. Clemson's played 11. Notre Dame played 11. Notre Dame and Clemson each had 1 loss, but it was to each other, and they're both pretty good football teams. Ohio State have played 6 games against less than difficult opposition, beating, Indiana, which is an impressive win, but they narrowly beat them, coming in as 17-point favorites, only winning that game by a touchdown, and then struggling to get past Northwestern on Saturday, who have no offensive game and really don't have a lot to brag about on defense either. But, the real reason that it's Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Notre Dame is because it sells. These 4 teams are brand names, and people are going to tune in on New Year's Day to watch the Final Four. And, me as just a fan, I'm going to tune in and watch whether it's Alabama versus Coastal Carolina or if it's Clemson versus, what have you. But it's about ratings. And for ESPN to get these blue blood schools that have been around forever into the Final Four is something that they really love to do. They do it every year. It's rare. It's never going to happen. So just to put this into context, Ohio State went 6-0, undefeated. Yes, but only played 6 games. In the Sun Belt Conference, it's not a Power 5, but Coastal Carolina. I never really heard of Coastal Carolina before this year. They went 11-0, and they beat everybody in their path. Like I said, undefeated season. And they beat a one-loss Louisiana team who was ranked, and they never even got into the top 10 when it came to rankings. The whole year. They never got into the top 10. And it's crazy when you think about it logically. 11-0 team, yes, they're not maybe playing against the Big Ten, but the Big Ten this year, Michigan was terrible. Michigan State's brutal. Illinois had 2 wins. Penn State went 2-5. This conference was a mess, to say the least. And, Coastal Carolina, to their credit, they even scheduled a game out of conference. They played undefeated BYU, and they beat BYU on the last second play. They stopped them at the goal line. They beat a then undefeated BYU team. And this system has been rigged for a long time because these little schools will never get a chance. Because maybe they're worried that Coastal Carolina would play Alabama at the 5:30 game on January 1st and get blown out, which could happen. Alabama is loaded with talent. And right now they're going to play Notre Dame. And I think Alabama's going to blow the hell out of Notre Dame because they're just better than them. They're just better. I think they're better than everybody in college football. They get the top recruiting class every year, so you're likely going to be better. And it's just they don't give these teams a chance. And it's upsetting because you had another team, Cincinnati, who's not a brand name team. They're not in a Power 5 conference. They went undefeated, 10-0. And towards the last rankings before this weekend, Cincinnati was ranked behind 2-loss Georgia, 2-loss Iowa State, 2-loss Oklahoma. And it makes no sense, right? No, it doesn't. But if this playoff committee ranks Cincinnati ahead of Georgia, ahead of these teams, like I said, 2 losses, 2-loss Oklahoma, then say something crazy happened on the weekend where Florida was another 2-loss team ranked ahead of Cincinnati. Florida went toe-to-toe with Alabama. They ended up losing 52-46. But if Florida would have beat Alabama, I guarantee you they would have been in the Final Four. Because you would have had Mac Jones and Kyle Trask, the 2 guys that will likely go 1-2 in the Heisman Trophy voting for College Football Player of the Year. And Florida has 2 losses, including a loss to LSU, who this year basically look like the Jets of college football. It's really astonishing. And I think, changing to an 18 playoff system would surely help. It would give these schools a chance. But even then, I'm not convinced that these small schools like Cincinnati, Coastal Carolina would even be ranked in the top 8. Because I'm looking at this year, and like I'm mentioning where they're ranked. So Coastal Carolina was 16th. And then you had all these teams above them. If it was an 18 playoff, we probably would have still had a 3-loss Florida for sure, because they would want Kyle Trask and the brand name. I wouldn't be shocked to have seen Georgia. 2-loss Georgia. They played in the SEC. They would have wanted them in there. There's another 2 teams. And it's baffling to me, this college football system. It's the most popular sport in North America. It's more popular than the NFL. college football. It is. And the amount of people that go to these games, and there's 130 D1 football schools, 130. And over 80% of them are screwed before the ball is kicked on day one of the season because they have no shot of going to the Final Four just based on brand name. So if you're a recruit and you're like, well, I want to go hide in the NFL draft. I think I got a lot of promise. Playing in that Final Four, it's spotlight. To put it in perspective for young kids, it's like playing the Memorial Cup. You're not telling me it didn't help Nathan McKinnon and Jonathan Drouin to play in the Mem Cup? Seth Jones? They're going high before, but there's players who get in these big spotlights, and guess what? They get drafted higher because they were there. Just happens. Cincinnati went undefeated. Desmond Ridder, their quarterback, has a lot of promise. But we don't get to see these schools. And 130 D1 schools and you're screwing 80 off the bat. It's a tough system to understand. And it's frustrating too. So yeah, we're going to see Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, Ohio State on January 1st. That's the college football playoff, the semifinals. The national championship game will be on January 11th. Until during our Christmas break, so to speak, there'll be a lot of bowl games too. So it's fun to watch, but it's just the system could be so much better where good teams are rewarded, and unfortunately they're not. Unless you got a big name, you're never going to get an opportunity. And I just like to see teams of any kind get a chance. In other sports, you make the playoffs, you get a chance, you get to play a game, you get to at least play one. In football, in the NFL, if you make the playoffs, you get to play one game. It might only be one, but that one game is worth something to you because at least you got a chance. In college football, teams that have great seasons sometimes don't get that chance. So it's just a frustrating system in college football. And hopefully, they're never going to turn it around probably, but I just hope to see something different moving forward because it's just monotonous and overplayed, quite frankly. Pivoting to the NFL, we saw some good action over the weekend. There was some Saturday games. We saw Buffalo destroy Denver in Denver. Josh Allen, 2 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns, and they clinched their first AFC East title since 1995. It's been a while for them. But the Buffalo Bills are for real. Stephon Diggs has over 100 catches. Cole Beasley I've mentioned them the past couple of weeks, but every week they're just solidifying themselves as the second best team in the AFC. And as the weeks go by, I have more and more confidence that they can give the Chiefs a run for their money and they could beat them. It's one game. You never know. Chiefs are 13-1. You got to respect them. No doubt about it. But the Bills just this year, they're not afraid. They're not playing with fear. They got stable coaching and they got a stud quarterback who's really starting to emerge as a player in this league. So good win for them. The nightcap of the Saturday games was Green Bay against Carolina. Carolina hung in there, made it interesting, but Green Bay ended up winning. They improved to 11-3. They clinched the NFC North title, and they also got some help over the weekend with a loss, but I'll touch on that in a bit. But Aaron Rodgers threw his 40th touchdown pass. Him and Mahomes are right there when it comes to MVP voting. I think it's still a coin flip with 2 weeks to go. We still got to watch those games. Green Bay actually plays this Sunday night against Tennessee. That's a spotlight game. I think if you played really well in it, it might lock up the MVP. So we'll see, but he's 37. He looks better than he has in years. And with the NFC not having a clear favorite in it, you can't count out Green Bay because Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Robert Tonyan, when Aaron Jones is healthy, their defense leaves something to be desired, but they're clicking right now, and they look like a formidable team to anyone that they come across. Another big game over the weekend was the AFC's playoff picture coming in, we had Kansas City, followed by Pittsburgh, followed by Buffalo, and then the 4th spot was locked up by the Tennessee Titans. So then the 3 wildcard teams, we have Cleveland, Indianapolis, and the Miami Dolphins. So the Miami Dolphins came in knowing that they had to win this game. They had to win it. They're 8-5 coming in. They're playing their division rival, the New England Patriots. And New England 6-7, likely not going to make the playoffs. But it's a division game, and you want to screw over, your rival. So this game was tightly contested. So early on in the game, both offenses were great. Tua Tagovailoa threw a red zone, end zone interception on a long drive. An over 7-minute drive, throws an interception in the end zone to J.C. Jackson, which you just can't do. He really poor decision. It was a rookie mistake, I would say, and it didn't look good. New England then went down the field and scored field goals, and this was really a theme of the game because New England had tons of opportunities to score, and they just couldn't. They settled for field goals 4 different times in the game from Nick Folk. He was perfect kicking. But as a coach, as a fan of a team, you never want to see your kicker, even if he's good, because you don't want to settle for field goals. And New England had to. Cam Newton wasn't having a great day. The running game was okay. They were without Damian Harris, their leading running back out of Alabama. And, this was a real spotlight game for the Miami Dolphins and Tua Tagovailoa. And in my opinion, it was his greatest start so far in the NFL. That red zone interception, terrible, inexcusable. You can't do it. Just to put that into perspective, Tua's played 5 games. Josh Allen has played almost 3 full years in the NFL. He has never thrown a red zone interception or has had a red zone turnover. So, it's a big sample size, small sample size, but Tua's got to figure that out. But I look at this as his most impressive start because he was without Devontae Parker, their leading receiver, Mike Gesicki, their top tight end, most touchdowns on their team, and Myles Gaskin, their leading running back. And they didn't rely on Tua a ton early because the Miami was running the ball. They came into the game averaging 3.7 yards per carry, which is worst in the NFL. And in the game, yesterday's game, they averaged over 5 yards a carry. Salman Ahmed, another running back. They've had plug-and-play running backs all year. He ran for $126. Matt Breida, a guy that the San Francisco 49ers kind of tossed overboard, who they didn't want following their Super Bowl victory, had 77 yards on the ground. And Tua Tagovailoa ran for 2 touchdowns. He played gutsy. He spread the ball around a ton. He didn't have, like I said, he didn't have his top receivers, but he went to running backs. He went to backup tight ends. Durham Smythe, Adam Shaheen got involved in the action. And he had to rely on targets he wasn't necessarily familiar with, and that's why I think it's his most impressive start. And, he had to be off script. We saw him 3rd down and 5, or 3rd and goal from the 5. He ran it in for a touchdown, squeezed in, did a quarterback sneak where he scored a touchdown. And he wasn't a hero where he had to throw for 400 yards and kind of put the team on his back, but he had to make gutsy plays in big moments to win this game. And, we didn't really see Cam Newton do that. He didn't have the big game that through the air because he hasn't all year. But Miami won, so they improved to 9-5. They stay in the final wildcard spot, winning 22-12. The Miami defense still played pretty well. Not allowing touchdowns. That's a big thing. In the NFL, you can allow as many yards as you want, but if you can keep your opponent to field goals, you're more than likely going to win. So another good game. But the big news was the Patriots, with the loss, were eliminated from playoff contention. They're now 6-8. It'll be their first time missing the playoffs since 2008, so a 12-year run is now over. And this team's kind of in a state of flux. They have Cam Newton at quarterback. He's only on a 1-year contract. I don't think he'll be back next year. Julian Edelman's been out all year. I could see him very much retiring just because he's a shell of himself and he's always hurt. And they don't have any real threats at their talent positions. At wide receiver, at tight end, Damian Harris looks like a good back, so rely on him. But in the NFL, you need a quarterback to win. It's rare that in today's game that, your defense can carry you. The 2000 Ravens, they had Ed Reed, they had Ray Lewis to compensate for Trent Dilfer, who was average at best. But in today's game, like the most recent example I can think of is the 2017 Jaguars. They had Blake Bortles at quarterback, who's not in the NFL anymore. And they had one of the top defenses at the time, but they got to the conference championship game and lost to New England. So New England needs to reassess. I think Matthew Stafford may be out of. Me and Ben talked about this on our podcast Friday night. Matthew Stafford might be out of Detroit. Jimmy Garoppolo could very well be released by San Francisco. Maybe they take a shot at a veteran, because I don't know if Bill Belichick really wants to have a rookie come in. But he's got to make changes. And Belichick's the general manager, and is probably his biggest weakness as a general manager is drafting wide receivers. And they're going to have to find some soon, because the ones they have right now are just flat out not talented. N'Keal Harry, who they drafted with the last pick in the first round 2 years ago, I mean, he had a ball thrown to him in this game, and he's big. He's 6'4", tough kid, and right through the hands. I mean, Cam threw a nice ball, and you're not going to win. And, this AFC playoff picture, the AFC this year is really strong. Cleveland picked up a victory on Sunday Night Football last night, defeating the Giants. They improved to 10-4. Bounce back. I thought they'd win, but it was good to see them come out, play well. Baker Mayfield is playing great football right now. That draft class, him and Josh Allen, it's really tough. I would take Josh Allen, because I think Josh Allen's going to be a top 5 quarterback in the league. He's trending towards that. But Baker Mayfield, people, the ESPN, those shows love to talk about Baker Mayfield and all the stuff he does wrong, but they should shut up and start praising him today, because he's played great. This whole year, really, he's played great football. I mean, they're 10-4 is 10-4. I don't, they can say, oh, well, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. Well, he's the quarterback. He's on that team. He's a part of that success. So they haven't clinched a playoff spot yet, but they do play the Jets next week. But so that should be a win, but that's the Rams about that one. But also the Indianapolis Colts defeated their division rival Houston Texans. They improved to 10-4, so they're on track to make the playoffs with Phillip Rivers, first year under center for the veteran. But like I said, Miami's 9-5, so they're a game behind Cleveland and Indy. And Miami finishes their season in Las Vegas Saturday night, and then they end their season at Buffalo. So they still have a tough schedule. Baltimore has the same record as Miami. Miami owns the tiebreaker, but Baltimore won yesterday as well, destroying the Jacksonville Jaguars. And they finish against the Giants and the Cincinnati Bengals. So it looks like Baltimore will win out pretty easy. So Miami's going to have to hope to win out to make the playoffs, in my mind. Unless they can hope for a loss from the Colts or the Browns down the stretch. But the Colts play the Steelers, and then they finish against Jacksonville. Browns play Jets, Steelers in the last week. So it's interesting. The Pittsburgh Steelers were idle yesterday. They play tonight against the Bengals. And I still think that Indy Steelers game, that's next Sunday, it's the 2:00 game, will be must-see TV, because Indy can clinch a playoff spot with a win. And the Steelers, if they lose that game, they will be a game ahead of Cleveland. But Cleveland and Pittsburgh play each other in Week 17, so that could potentially be for the division. Pittsburgh won the first time easily, 38-6, but they could try to get some redemption. The Browns go in at home, try to beat the Steelers. They still got to win that cup. They have to lose that game to Indy, but there's still some possible intrigue in the AFC here, because there's a lot of good teams and a lot of good football left to play with 2 weeks to go. Another game, probably the game of the day, was Kansas City against New Orleans, and it was the return of Drew Brees. We learned Saturday that Michael Thomas, the Saints' leading receiver, one of the best receivers in the NFL, went on IR with a hamstring injury. So he'll miss the remainder of the season. Will be able to come off injured reserve for the wild card weekend in the playoffs. But it was the theme of the day where teams got out to leads and kind of let them hang around. And Kansas City does this a ton. They got out to an early lead. Drew Brees was 0 for 6 for 6 throws with an interception. Mahomes that threw touchdown passes to Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. And then later to Mecole Hardman. But, they let New Orleans come back. In the fourth quarter, New Orleans had 2 touchdowns. Drew Brees had 3 touchdowns in the game. After a slow start, he turned it around. And the Chiefs ended up winning 32-29. But I keep banging the drum. I know it's kind of on deaf ears because they keep winning. But you got to be able to kill your opponent, and you got to put them to bed. And they just don't do that. And that worries me long term. I don't know why, but they seem to just lay off the gas a little bit and just rest on their laurels that they're going to be okay. And I don't know. They worry me a little bit. They're 13-1, so that the record speaks for itself. They're in line to get the bye, so they'll won't have to play wild card weekend. But the Chiefs still leave something to be desired. I think Patrick Mahomes obviously is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He threw an incredible touchdown pass to Mecole Hardman yesterday in the back of the end zone. I don't know how he fit it in that tight window. But they still leave something to be desired in my mind. And they finish their season at Atlanta, and then they host the Chargers. So it's not a tough schedule for them. But in the playoffs, I think they're going to have to play better football if they're going to want to win the Super Bowl this year. They can't give up the big leads like they did last year, because teams like Buffalo will beat them if they mess around like they have been. Mention Atlanta. They played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers yesterday. And if you know the Atlanta Falcons, they really had a black cat running around their franchise since they blew the Super Bowl in New England, where they had a 28-3 lead at halftime and they lost the game in overtime. So in this game, of course, no different. Matt Ryan was playing great. They had a 17-0 lead at halftime. The Bucs looked like a team that shouldn't even be in the playoff discussion. Tom Brady looked 43, maybe older in the first half. They had no running game. But they came out in the second half firing. Tom Brady looked like vintage Tom Brady. And he threw 2 touchdown passes in the second half. One to Mike Evans, one to Antonio Brown. Leonard Fournette ran in 2 one-yard touchdown runs. But yeah, Brady threw for almost 300 yards in the second half. And Atlanta blew another huge lead to a Tom Brady-led team. It looked like Atlanta was going to be okay. Tampa Bay had the ball, to start the second half, touchdown. But then Atlanta got the ball right back, and they drove easy down the field. Quick touchdown drive. But then Brady had a touchdown pass to Mike Evans. And that's when the defense, who was they sucked in the first half for Tampa Bay, woke up. And Atlanta's another team where they're in flux. I don't know what they're going to do in the offseason. I think Matt Ryan will be released or traded, maybe Julio Jones as well. But one thing you got to have in a running back is a dual threat, but also you got to have a running back that can block. So if you're watching this game, Devin White sacked Matt Ryan 3 times in the second half, all on third down. And there's basically the same play where it was Todd Gurley, another one Brian Hill, where a running back is in coverage and he's got to block the middle linebacker who's blitzing. And they failed to pick it up 3 times. I don't know who's coaching, but the second you should get to the sideline is grab that little iPad that you guys love to pull out and say, hey, what the hell are you doing here? Your job is to chip. Matt Ryan is a stationary quarterback. He's not fast. So it was just baffling to me that 3 times the same thing happened and nothing changed. And the Falcons, again, their season was over before this game, but to have a little bit of pride and have a big win against Tampa Bay would have been big for them. But they've changed Dan Quinn, but I think Matt Ryan, just for his career, because he's way better than he's showing right now. He needs to get out of Atlanta. I still think he's got some good football left in him, but a change of scenery would be really good for him, probably for the franchise too. But that franchise is under a dark cloud, and they can't seem to get under it. Um, the big win for Tampa Bay. They improved to 9-5. They haven't secured a playoff spot yet, but they can on Saturday when they play the Lions. But for them, their defense didn't show up in the first half, did in the second half, but they beat a bad team. So I'm not going to give them that much credit for beating an Atlanta team that, basically loses on their own. And Tampa Bay cannot expect Tom Brady to be what he was in the second half every game, because it's not going to happen. We've seen this year where he's looked great and then he's looked, 50. So this team's going to have to play good complementary football for them to possibly win the Super Bowl. I think they can get to the Super Bowl because the NFC does not have many strong teams. They can easily I think they can get to the Super Bowl this year. But they cannot expect Tom Brady to be Superman. In New England, this is kind of something that I don't think people like to talk about because, Tom Brady gets propped up more than probably any other quarterback in the history of the game, which he's won Super Bowl, so good for him. But, their defenses over the years were really good. Really good. The first 3 Super Bowls he won because of his defense, not because of Tom Brady. You could say the last 3, it was because of him. Okay, I'm fine with that. But the Tampa Bay defense is going to have to wake up and really help him because, he's like I'm just saying, he can't be the best player every week because I just don't think he's got that in him at this age, which he shouldn't. He's 43 years old. So playing good complementary football, Tampa Bay Buccaneers can get to the Super Bowl this year. No doubt. With New Orleans spiraling downward, with the Rams spiraling downward, Seattle being really inconsistent the whole year. Arizona's there. I don't see them this year taking that big of a leap. The Washington or whoever wins the NFC East, that's not a strong division. So it's wide open for them to take it, but we'll see what happens. Another crazy outcome was the Jets. The Jets defeated the LA Rams 23-20. And it was the Jets' first one of the year. They probably should have 2 now. They should have beaten Oakland if Greg Williams didn't make that idiotic call. But the bigger news for them winning is that they no longer have control of the first overall pick in the 2021 NFL draft. With the win, they are now tied with the Jacksonville Jaguars in record. But the team, it's not a draft lottery like the NHL and NBA. In the NFL, the team with the worst record gets the first overall pick. If there's a tie, then the team with the strongest schedule will get the first overall pick when it comes to competition. And Jacksonville has that right now. They've had the tougher schedule than the Jets, and the Jags own the first pick right now. And it's a crazy development because the Jets they've stunk all year. It's just been this build up towards drafting Trevor Lawrence. It's just been a foregone conclusion. And it's so Jets for them to win this game. And I get it. The players don't tank. Whenever I hear that, I think that's just a false narrative. But, for the future of this team, for the future coach, for a coach that if you can try to get a good coach to come, is he going to want to coach Justin Fields? I think it's a much easier sell to say, hey, we have Trevor Lawrence, Clemson, the prodigy. Come coach him. Sure. I'll be there in a minute. But now the Jacksonville Jaguars have control of the first pick. And this is just funny because the Jaguars now can draft Trevor Lawrence. He's from the South. He's from the Georgia area. Obviously, that's not Jacksonville, but he likes the warm weather. He said that in interviews. I heard him interviewed this week on the Dan Patrick Show. And it's just crazy that the Jets might lose out on Trevor Lawrence because the Rams just are. I said this to Ben on our Friday podcast. I don't trust the Rams. I still don't. This is why I don't have any faith in them winning anything in the playoffs. If they had a Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, I think they could win the Super Bowl this year. Just Ryan Tannehill is really efficient quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. If they had him, they could win the Super Bowl. Jared Goff, who was the first overall pick in the 2016 draft, he's just not it. I'm not saying he's a bust, but he's not a great quarterback. I mean, you lose to the Jets, I don't care. I don't care what happens. It's tough. It looks really bad right now on the Rams that they're in this position. They have the talent to win a Super Bowl, but they don't have the quarterback. The rest of their team is really solid. They're the best defensive player in football, but I just don't see them going far with Jared Goff at quarterback. And it's tough, but they can't really do anything about it this year. They got to hope to get something out of these players, but they're just an embarrassing loss for the Rams. Just really embarrassing that you lay an egg like that. And with that loss, they dropped to 9-5. Seattle beat the Washington football team, so Seattle is 10-4, and they now have the lead in the NFC West. And they play each other next Sunday. So that'll be for the division. And the Rams, they play against Seattle and Arizona to finish the year. They could be in some trouble here if they don't. They got 2 tough games. They lose both of them, they're in a lot of trouble. Also, in the day we saw Arizona play the Eagles, and the results wasn't the most interesting thing for me. I think it's just the future of the league. Jalen Hurts, I think the jury's still out on him as a quarterback going forward, but him and Kyler Murray were a lot of fun to watch. The Cardinals were up 16-0 early, but the Eagles rallied. Jalen Hurts, 3 touchdown passes, a rushing touchdown. Kyler Murray, 3 touchdown passes, a rushing touchdown. Kyler throwing for 400 yards, Jalen throwing for 338. But these guys are both fun to watch. Came down to the end of the game. Jalen Hurts threw a Hail Mary. They couldn't convert to Dallas Goedert, but Jalen Hurts is making it more and more interesting for Philadelphia because he's only going to be able to play 4 games this year. And if he looks good in all 4, the pressure will be on more and more to remove Carson Wentz. There was a report yesterday that Wentz is not okay with being the backup long-term and that he'd want out of Philadelphia. So just some interesting dynamics here where, 2 running quarterbacks that are dual threats with their leg and also have an arm. That's the future quarterback, Lamar Jackson. But Kyler Murray and Jalen Hurts are both like Lamar. They're both electric. Kyler Murray has 11 rushing touchdowns this year. He's tied with Cam Newton for that lead for quarterbacks. But just a great game to watch and ton of talent. Arizona. I'd love to see Larry Fitzgerald. He catches a touchdown pass back of the end zone. 37 years old, but he still got it. I wouldn't be surprised to see him back again next year. With Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, this team's moving forward. And I hope he plays as long as he wants to because I have a real love for Larry Fitz. He's one of my favorite people in football. So he's a lot of fun to watch. So a big day for football. Obviously, 2 weeks left after tonight's game between the Steelers and Bengals, and still a lot to be uncovered here. Christmas Day game on Friday between the Vikings and Saints, and then 3 Saturday games. Oh, it's just going to be phenomenal. Christmas, Christmas Day, 5 basketball games, football game, 3 World Juniors. Saturday, bunch of basketball, 3 World Junior games, including Team Canada, 3 football games. Yeah, I can't wait. Coaching. It'll be a fun couple days. But before we end the podcast, I thought I'd tell you guys that on the weekend the NHL made a deal with the Players Association to start play on January 13th. So the season will commence on January 13th. There's 4 different divisions. Basically, geographically, Boston, the New York teams, they're all in one division, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. But one of the big things, the Canadian division. And that's the biggest one in flux right now. Because as of right now, there's no deal where the provincial governments are letting their teams play in their area. So in Ontario, they do not have a deal to allow the Maple Leafs and the Senators to play in their home rinks. Quebec hasn't agreed to that yet. Alberta is the easiest one. That's a go out there. British Columbia is also not confirmed. Manitoba, I think, is leaning towards saying yes. But this division will likely be a go because I think even say if Ontario says, nope, we're not doing it, I think teams will play out of Alberta, say Edmonton as a hub, not a bubble like they did in the playoffs, but go in there, play a bunch of games against different teams. Toronto and Ottawa could play each other in Edmonton. And it would make no difference because there's no fans. So, for people at home watching a game at the Rogers Place or Scotiabank Arena, it doesn't really matter because nobody's there. But I think it will be a go, even if they have to send, even Quebec, send Montreal to play in Edmonton for a while. I think the season will commence with a Canadian division. As we get closer, I'll do another podcast, preview show, talk about each division. Yeah, I'm glad for the fans. There's a Canadian division. I'm not thrilled. But it's not all about me. I've learned that in life. It's not all about me. But that's just kind of up to date. The season's a go. Training camps are going to start for the teams that did not make the playoffs December 31st. For the other teams, January 3rd, and the puck will drop on Wednesday, January 13th. They haven't announced the schedule yet. They're planning on doing that midweek. So I'll keep you guys posted on that. But a lot of fun, a lot of sports on the horizon. Things starting to get back to normal, so it's good to see. With vaccinations and things, maybe fans will be back in buildings. Hopefully by the summer. Yeah, that's kind of my hope. Even the playoffs starting in May, you never know. Maybe get some asses in the seats. But this week, just to let you guys know, tomorrow night, me and Seamus will be doing our regular The Observers podcast, recapping episodes 7 and 8 of Next. Wednesday morning, I'm going to be doing a show just talking about a bunch of different things. The NBA kicks off Tuesday night with a doubleheader. I'll be breaking down those games. Also touching on any new NHL news, the Monday Night Football game, and kind of previewing the weekend in football. And then Thursday, I'm going to be doing a World Junior preview show. And, a little fun Christmas Eve, going to do that podcast after work. So just give you guys an update on where Team Canada stands, players to look out for on other teams. And I'll kind of give you guys my predictions on who will win the tournament, maybe major awards, things of that nature. So that'll be dropping Thursday evening, Christmas Eve. So I'll keep you guys posted on everything, but look out for that. But we'll be talking. I'll be back on here tomorrow night with Seamus. But until then, we'll talk soon. Have a great day, everybody.